Okay, so as I mentioned in my previous video about Paul Castellano, I was going to return to this episode, Mr. Ruggerios Neighborhood, because there's two pieces of mob history that we can pull from. So obviously I went through the whole last time with the bugging of the lamp and all that, wiretapping Paul Castellano's home. In this one now we're going to dive into a sort of a separate story within mafia history. So the name of the episode is Mr. Ruggerios Neighborhood, which of course is a reference to the plumber that comes to the house when Tony's water heater blows.
The fucking room. The room.
Mr. Ruggerio, thank God.
The fucking water heater blew. Just blew.
The guarantee's gotta be expired by now.
But this is also a pretty obvious reference to the mobster Angelo Quack Quack Ruggerio. So Angelo Ruggerio was a soldier in the Gambino family. He was a close friend of John Gotti. His uncle was also the infamous underboss of the Gambino family, Angelo Della Croce, or Neil Della Croce.
Your first time here?
The Della Croces gave me a gift certificate.
While the FBI was looking for ways to catch members of the Gambino family, their informants told them about Angelo Ruggerio and the fact that he was an incessant chatterbox, thus giving him the name Quack Quack. And they decided that this would be a good point to start their investigation. So they tapped his telephones, including a pink princess phone that his daughter had, which was on a separate line than the main house line. And he would often use this pink princess phone to talk business. However, Ruggerio moved from Queens to Cedarhurst, Long Island. So the FBI had to kind of scramble to come up with a new way to wiretap Quack Quack, if you will, Angelo Ruggerio. So what they did was they once again bugged his phones, but they also found that in his home there was like a dinette, so a kind of a little dining area, and they put a bug in there. And my word, did Ruggerio live up to his nickname of Quack Quack. He outlaid a ton of information about the inner workings of the Gambino family, disputes and feuds and all this type of stuff. And he gave out so much information, in fact, that it gave the FBI probable cause to bug Paul Castellano's house. On top of that, they earned enough probable cause from this bug to also bug Angelo Ruggerio's uncle, Angelo Della Croce, by putting a bug in Della Croce's Staten Island home. So interestingly, I actually have a book, Wiretap, listening to America's Mafia, 25 mob leaders in their own wiretapped words. And in this book is a series of the conversations that they were able to tape at Angelo Ruggerio's house. There's one conversation in particular that I wanted to read to you guys that I feel like also relates directly to The Sopranos, or you can see how they use this as an inspiration for some of the scenes in the show. Okay, so in this particular conversation, Ruggerio is talking to one of his associates, a guy called Pete Tambone. But what I think is interesting is that Ruggerio is interrupted by his son, John. Got any money? And Ruggerio says, "Go upstairs in my pants, they're hanging over the, bring them down." "I'm gonna take the little car," says his son. Ruggerio, Angelo, here's $17, good night. Then Pete, the friend, says, "Watch yourself, kid, there's bad people in the street." And then Ruggerio says to his son, "Hey John, don't go to Howard Beach, do me a favor, please." So here, especially I feel like is a very good domestic scene that's totally right out of The Sopranos. His son comes downstairs, he asks him for money.
I need $15.
Excuse me?
A Cole Porter CD. It's for Madrigals. We're doing 3 of his songs.
Yeah.
The FBI learned that Ruggerio, along with his brother, John Gotti's brother, and a few other guys were involved in a large-scale heroin distribution ring. Anyway, because the FBI had hit a motherlode of information and intelligence, they began to prepare some indictments and cases, including going after Ruggerio, John Gotti's brother, and others for this drug ring that they had. During the discovery phase of the trial, word of what was on the tapes had leaked out, including the fact that several of these Gambino members were involved in drug trafficking, which of course was outlawed by Paul Castellano and many of the other New York City godfathers. They did not want the mobsters dealing in drugs. They were worried about the heavy jail sentences and the guys ratting on them and so on and so forth. Anyway, once word got out, Paul Castellano constantly asked to hear the tapes so that he could confirm the leaks were real and then ultimately, perhaps hand down death sentences, if you will, to Ruggerio and others involved, including John Gotti and his brother, everybody. Ironically, the FBI picked up a conversation between Della Croce, John Gotti, and Ruggerio discussing the tapes. The bug was, of course, the one that the FBI had planted in Della Croce's Staten Island home. In the conversation, Della Croce himself, acting as his nephew's protector, explains that there's only so long he can delay the handing over of the tapes to Castellano because he keeps asking for them. But Ruggerio flat out refuses to hand them over.
I'm gonna tell you something. If you two never bother with me again the rest of my life, I ain't giving them tapes. I can't. There's good friends of mine on them tapes. Well, he's the boss. You have to do what he tells you.
That's why I said to you before, you don't understand what an usher means that the boss is your boss. Understand?
Soon after this, however, things were completely turned on their head. Della Croce himself had been sick with cancer and was basically on his deathbed. Once he died, Gotti, Ruggerio, and the others didn't have anyone to protect them from the wrath of Paul Castellano. This caused John Gotti and the others to be in a kill or be killed type of situation in which John Gotti murdered Paul Castellano and became the boss of the Gambino family. Ruggerio, also a heavy smoker, contracted lung cancer around this time and himself was dying. Gotti, however, was so angry at Ruggerio and his loose talk, Gotti never spoke to his close friend ever again, as Ruggerio died soon after of complications from his lung cancer. And the remaining defendants in the drug case were given 30-year sentences, including John Gotti's brother, Gene, who was released from prison actually sometime in 2018, I believe. Anyway, the name of this episode, Mr. Ruggerios Neighborhood, and elements of the storyline portrayed within are absolutely taken from the saga of Angelo Quack Quack Ruggerio. Also, we can see how this particular video that I'm doing now is related to my previous episode, The Real Tony Soprano Part 2, which is filled with many references to the bugging of Paul Castellano's house. And of course, the probable cause to bug his house came initially from the bugging of Angelo Ruggerio's house. And so obviously the writers of The Sopranos were pulling from the life of Angelo Ruggerio and his own run-in with the FBI and wiretapping of his house, as well as making reference to Paul Castellano and his run-in with the FBI and wiretapping of his house, and the fact that both of these instances, these cases in real life, were inextricably related. For those of you who did not see the initial one I did on The Real Tony Soprano Part 2, which references the Paul Castellano wiretapping conversations, I will link that in the description below. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys.
Yeah, it's Mr. Ruggerios Neighborhood.